There's nothing more exhilarating than pointing out the shortcomings of others, is there?
This video was made possible due to those who support me on Patreon. I'd like to give a big shout out to patrons Bedside Milk, Chris Hutchison, Christopher Spirit B, Conrad Truitt, Dan Ray, David Paradis, Eric Navarro, Flake, Frame by Frame, Joseph Abrams, KB, Kyle Kramer, Mayfin, Majin Weeaboo, Malav Shah, Matthew Gay, Sophia Narwitz, and Stephen Dillon. Thank you all for your support. The Northman, directed by Robert Eggers, tells the story of Icelandic Prince Amleth, who after witnessing his father slain and his mother captured by his uncle Fjolnir, sets out on a decades-long quest to avenge his father, save his mother, and kill his traitorous uncle. But what begins as a seemingly conventional revenge tale takes a decidedly different turn, as Amleth's clear-cut pursuit for vengeance becomes more complicated, culminating in an incredible twist that completely upends his lifelong quest and sets up a gut-wrenching final act. And then concludes in an underwhelming, cowardly, and thematically dissonant fashion. Let's break it down. One of my own personal mantras when it comes to writing is, a simple story can be enormously effective if told well. The first 2/3 of The Northman are a perfect example of this principle. Despite the story of a protagonist on a quest to avenge their loved ones by no means being that original, the Viking setting and raw filmmaking intensity make the film a riveting and visceral experience. But that is not to say the film doesn't throw in any subversion along the way. While Amleth is the quote-unquote hero of the story, it doesn't shy away from highlighting his own questionable morality. One of the more interesting turns of the film comes when Amleth learns that Fjolnir, having been usurped from the same kingdom he stole from his brother, now lives in exile with Amleth's mother Gudrun and his 2 sons. While a lesser storyteller would have characterized Fjolnir as a brutal tyrant, Eggers portrays him as now a humble farmer and loving family man, thus giving the audience pause as to whether we are still on board with Amleth's quest. But all in all, the first 2/3 of the film play out as a somewhat conventional revenge tale. Amleth poses as a slave on Fjolnir's farm and wreaks havoc, seeking to mentally torment his uncle before taking his vengeance, all the while forming a relationship with a slave woman by the name of Olga and plotting to save his mother. Again, nothing too out of pocket for your standard revenge fare. That is until the scene where Amleth speaks with his mother for the first time in decades, in which he announces his intent to save her and kill the man who took everything from them. And over the course of a single monologue, she proceeds to destroy his entire world. She reveals that, rather than the soft, kind man Amleth remembers, his father was a greedy and gluttonous slaver. She was in fact a slave herself, and the conception of Amleth was not a product of love, but of rape. It was her who begged Fjolnir, who sincerely loved Gudrun, to betray his own brother and kill Amleth to avoid him coming for revenge. Another go-to writing mantra is to think of the worst possible thing that could happen to your protagonist and make it happen. The image of the father he set out to avenge has been soiled. The mother he desired to save reveals she was the one who ordered his death. The man he thought a traitorous devil is now shown to be more than meets the eye. In a single scene, the mission Amleth has dedicated his entire life to is thrown into complete disarray. For me, it was at this point the film went from a solid 7 or 8 to a stone cold 10, as it reframes the entire moral conflict of the film. In the following scene where Amleth saves Olga's life but is captured by Fjolnir, it was the first time I saw Amleth as the villain of the story. No longer a sympathetic man on a righteous quest for vengeance, but a bloodthirsty psychopath, terrorizing a loving father and his family to avenge a man he hardly knew. It was an absolutely amazing turn, and I for one was ecstatic to see how the final act would play out. And then it just sort of shits the bed, to be completely honest. Amleth escapes captivity and decides to forgo his quest for vengeance and flee with Olga. But upon learning that Olga is pregnant, Amleth realizes they will never be safe as long as Fjolnir lives. Thus, he decides to kill Fjolnir once and for all. Now, in theory, I actually love how this is set up. Instead of Amleth returning for vengeance, he does so to protect those he loves. But now we come to the issues I have with the final act. So Amleth returns, kills his own mother after she attacks him, faces off against Fjolnir in a badass showdown in a fucking volcano, and takes him out Marie Antoinette style. Amleth is fatally wounded in the battle, and after seeing a vision of Olga and their children safe, dies and ascends to Valhalla. which at least to me seems like a strangely uplifting ending, I guess. Like, the film goes to great lengths to reframe Gudrun and Fjolnir as not innocent, but more complex, and to put Amleth's moral justification for vengeance into question, but then has the ending play out in a conventional good guy versus bad guy fashion. For comparison, if we take the ending of The Lion King, which seems appropriate considering it's based off Hamlet, which was based off the legend of Amleth, where Simba kills his traitorous uncle Scar and becomes king, the reason this works is because at no point is Simba ever framed as if he is in the wrong. He is always the good guy taking down the bad guy. Thus, the big climactic spectacle and uplifting finale fits. But in The Northman, it feels dissonant. The film dresses down Amleth's heroism, but still gives him a quote-unquote hero's death, if you will. It's also ignoring that the entire reason Amleth is put into the position where he has to return to kill Fjolnir is due to him killing Fjolnir's elder son earlier in the film. However, as a counter-argument to my own contention, Gudrun and Fjolnir still conspired to kill Amleth as a boy and slaughtered his village. So despite Amleth's own moral grayness, one can still make the case that Amleth killing them doesn't really sully his heroic intent to stop Fjolnir from coming for him and his children, since you could argue they are still worse in a sense. What I am getting at is that despite my contention that the final act doesn't fit thematically with what came before it, it isn't completely fatal to the film. What is completely fatal to the film is the inclusion of a character whose presence results in the entire third act becoming an incoherent mess. That character is Gudrun's son with Fjolnir, Amleth's half-brother, the young Gunnar. Amleth states that he views Gunnar as an innocent and won't harm him during his quest to enact vengeance on Fjolnir. Okay, so what's the issue? The issue is that when Amleth realizes Olga is pregnant and that he must return to kill Fjolnir, what the film completely glosses over is that Amleth must also kill Gunnar. Now you might be saying, well, he doesn't have to. I mean, what's Gunnar gonna do? Develop a massive bloodlust for vengeance and years down the line seek out the one who killed his family and take from him everything he holds dear?
Tweak, when has that ever happened except for that one time?
If Amleth truly wants to ensure the safety of his family, he needs to kill Gunnar. I actually think this could have been a brilliant turn. Another key mantra of effective storytelling: confront your character with an impossible choice. Put them in the most teeth-grindingly, hair-pullingly difficult situation and give them no other option but to make the call. To put an end to the cycle of violence and vengeance once and for all, Amleth must do something as horrific as killing an innocent child. He must become the monster he has hunted his entire life. But unfortunately, the film, for lack of a better term, kinda pussies out, since Amleth never seems to note this fact. I'm sure right now some of you may be confused, seeing as Amleth does kill Gunnar in the film's final act. Well, let's break the death scene down. So after Amleth returns to kill Fjolnir, he is attacked by Gudrun and kills her. As his back is turned, Gunnar jumps on him and starts stabbing away. Amleth spins around, his sword cutting Gunnar across the chest, killing him. Now, okay, so for those of you who have seen the film, perhaps you can shed some light on this for me or give your opinion, but I have no idea whether this was an accident, if he did intend to kill him but only out of self-defense, or if he was planning on killing him from the get-go. Regardless, the confusion as to whether or not Gunnar was killed on purpose, by accident, or out of quote-unquote self-defense completely undermines the final act. For those of you who have seen my review on The Last of Us Part 2, one of my main complaints is that while pursuing her vengeance, the character of Ellie kills many people, but each time she does, it is mostly done in clear self-defense. I argued that this was done to try and maintain Ellie's moral purity. They didn't want to make her too unsympathetic. Thus, they didn't want to contend with the moral implications of her killing in cold blood. I feel very much the same way about how the film frames Gunnar's death. Not only does it gloss over the fact that Amleth would have needed to kill Gunnar, since the film wanted to give Amleth his quasi-hero's ending, it had to dull the impact of him killing Gunnar by allowing us to say, oh well, he didn't mean to kill him, or it was out of self-defense. So they could give him his hero's ending. They know Gunnar needed to die, but they didn't want to shoulder the full responsibility of his death on Amleth's shoulders, thus making the ascension at the end of the film seem really strange. Wait, I'm sorry, Mac, are you literally saying the fatal flaw in the film is that the protagonist was not deliberate enough in killing an innocent child?
You're goddamn right.
But what doesn't make much sense is that despite the film's efforts to try and downplay Amleth's culpability in Gunnar's death, no scenario makes the final act any less dissonant. If Amleth had no intention of killing Gunnar at all, then it results in a massive contrivance, since his family would still be at risk, thus negating the entire point of going back to kill Fjolnir. If Amleth did intend to kill Gunnar, even if he found him cowering helplessly in the corner, then it makes his quote-unquote hero's death even more thematically dissonant. Even if it was an accident, well, he still did it. It's like, good job, Amleth, you ensured the safety of your lover and children. I mean, yeah, there was that thing with you spilling the guts of an innocent child on his living room floor, but woo, ascension! What's really weird is that the film didn't seem like the sort to try and do this. I personally loved how the film didn't take sides, if you will, and was simply telling the story of an immensely brutal world. Whoever you see as the good or bad guy is up to you. But the tone of the ending seemed to betray this, as though it wanted to have its cake and eat it too. To be more complex in that it framed Amleth as morally gray, but didn't want to go too far so it could still set up his heroic end. It feigns the appearance of a subversive take on the standard revenge narrative, but concludes in conventional fashion. What makes no sense to me is that it's not like Eggers is one to shy away from brutality. The Witch and the Lighthouse, whether you think it was for better or worse, were brutal as fuck. They didn't pull any punches. So why did it seem like the Northman did? Well, and look, I want to stress that I'm not some Eggers fanboy trying to absolve him of any guilt. I love The Witch, but appreciate The Lighthouse more than I like it. However, one thing that can't be ignored is the fact that this was Eggers' first experience with a large studio project. To put in perspective, The Witch and The Lighthouse had budgets of 4 and 11 million respectively. The Northman had 70 to 90 million, which is based, but with a large budget comes gaggle of studio executives less concerned with artistic merit than they are fat returns. And it is absolutely no secret that Eggers having to deal with said gaggle was not a pleasant experience for him. Apparently test screenings didn't go so well, so the studio executives leaned on him to deliver a different cut of the film, an experience that he stated was the most painful of his life. I'll post a link to the full New Yorker profile for you to check out, but just from reading the article, it is very clear that Eggers was very pissed about not having as much control as he did on previous films, with him even stating he would never do a project on this scale again out of fear of not having as much artistic freedom. So yeah, it may sound like I am going all conspiracy theory here, but frankly, I don't think it's that much of a stretch to at least theorize that studio executives were like, yo, having your protagonist slaughter an innocent child ain't gonna fly if we're forking over blockbuster moolah, so you gotta make it less cold-blooded. Even the scene where Gunnar is killed is sort of like off. Like the film is so incredibly choreographed, but then when Gunnar is killed, like Amleth just kind of like he's kind of yeets him off his back and like just kind of like whips around awkwardly, and the sound effects imply he got gutted, but like I don't know, it seems sloppy. So I wouldn't be surprised if this was a reshoot of some sort. Again, let me stress, I have no evidence that the studio had Eggers change Gunnar's death to a quasi self-defense / maybe accidental one. I mean, when have production executives ever made radical changes to a film that resulted in its quality being diminished greatly until they were fixed years later? All I'm saying is that it feels suspect. Here's hoping we get some more details as to how the whole production went down in the future, or hell, maybe even a director's cut someday. To be clear, I am not saying the film is by any means poor. The majority of the storytelling, the performances, the action choreography, the brutality, the subversion, and just the fact that a story such as this was given studio backing are all great. It's just disappointing to see such an incredible vision have to compromise, I presume, for the sake of marketability. And I hope the Northman's disappointing box office return won't deter studios from funding similar projects in the future. And I definitely hope it won't result in other films that have the potential to be incredible works of art pulling their punches for the sake of what they think audiences want. Because, at least for me, there is nothing I love more than a film landing a haymaker square in my jaw. Cinematically speaking, of course.